My name is Violet Hall. I'm 31 years old, and until 3 weeks ago, I was engaged to a man I genuinely believed I was going to marry. What happened in a therapist's office on a quiet Wednesday afternoon still feels unreal, like something that happened to another woman, someone careless, someone naive, but it happened to me. And once the words were spoken out loud, there was no pretending they hadn't been said. My dad raised me on one rule: build your foundation before you build anything else. Career before comfort, independence before partnership, stability before romance. So I did exactly that. I became a junior structural engineer straight out of college, throwing myself into 60-hour work weeks on bridge inspections and highway expansion projects. I lived in a cramped studio apartment with thin walls and unreliable heat, surviving on cheap groceries and determination. I said no to vacations, no to impulse spending, no to anything that slowed me down. By 25, I had enough saved for a down payment on a foreclosure in a decent neighborhood. It wasn't pretty. Peeling paint, outdated wiring, water stains on the ceiling, but it had solid bones. Potential. I spent 2 years fixing it up myself, learning plumbing and electrical work from YouTube videos and my contractor friend, Evan Carter. That house became my proof that I could build something from the ground up. When I finished the last room, my dad came over, walked through the space slowly, and nodded. "You did good, Vi," he said. From him, that was the highest praise imaginable. I met Lucas Bennett 3 years ago at a mutual friend's wedding. I was a bridesmaid. He was a groomsman. We bonded over bad DJ music and the open bar, laughing about how awkward the speeches were. He was charming, articulate, and worked in marketing at a tech startup downtown. One of those modern offices with exposed brick, kombucha on tap, and ping pong tables no one actually used. The first 6 months felt effortless. We had chemistry. We laughed at the same stupid shows. He listened when I rambled about load-bearing calculations and soil compression tests, even if I wasn't entirely sure he understood them. He stayed over most weekends. We cooked together, watched movies, existed in that comfortable early relationship bubble where everything feels possible. I introduced him to Evan and Evan's wife, Melissa, within the first month. They were polite, friendly enough. But later that night, Evan pulled me aside. "He's fine," he said carefully, "but something feels off." "Off how?" I asked, already defensive. "Like he's performing," Evan said. "Like he's auditioning for the role of perfect boyfriend." I laughed it off. "You're overthinking it," I told him. "Not everyone is as blunt as you and Melissa." Evan didn't argue. He just shrugged. "Just keep your eyes open." I didn't. About a year into the relationship, Lucas started mentioning his ex-girlfriend, Claire. At first it was subtle, passing comments about someone he dated in college, or stories that happened to include her name. Then the details became more specific. They'd dated for 4 years at Colorado State. She'd been ambitious, driven. After graduation, she moved to New York for her career, and the distance ended things. "She was kind of the one that got away," he said once while we were watching a movie. He laughed, like it was a joke. But the way he said it, soft, distant, almost reverent, made my stomach twist. Everyone has exes, I told myself. It doesn't mean anything. When I mentioned it to Evan during a weekend hike, he frowned. "Most people don't talk about their exes like they're mythical creatures," he said. "Melissa barely remembers her high school boyfriend's last name." I defended Lucas without hesitation. "He's just being honest about his past," I said. "It means he trusts me." Looking back, I can see how desperately I wanted that to be true. At 18 months, I proposed. We'd just returned from a weekend trip to Breckenridge, and everything felt right. I'd saved for a ring, not outrageous, but meaningful. A princess-cut diamond I knew he liked. I proposed at his favorite Italian restaurant downtown, the one with string lights on the patio. He cried, said yes, posted about it immediately. Finally settling down with my forever person. At the time, I smiled when I read it. I didn't understand what settling really meant to him yet. We moved in together 2 months later. His lease was ending, and it made sense financially. Why pay two rents when we were getting married? Living together changed things. Lucas never seemed invested in making the house feel like ours. When I asked his opinion on furniture or decor, he shrugged. "Whatever you think is best." At first, I thought he was easygoing. Later, I realized he just didn't care. He spent hours scrolling on his phone, especially Instagram. I caught glimpses of familiar faces from his college days. When I asked who he was looking at, he'd close the app too quickly. Just old friends. One night, I woke up around 2 a.m. and saw light under the bedroom door. Lucas was awake, phone in hand. He nearly dropped it when he saw me. "You scared me," he said, hand over his chest. "Sorry," I replied lightly. "Who are you stalking at 2 in the morning?" "No one, I just couldn't sleep." He put the phone face down immediately. I didn't push, I should have. His phone started going everywhere with him. Bathroom, kitchen, even short trips to the car. When I mentioned it, he snapped. I'm allowed to have privacy, Violet. The biggest red flag, though, was the difference between how he talked about the wedding and how he talked about our future. He obsessed over the venue, the photos, the guest list, spent hours on Pinterest. But when I brought up life after, kids, long-term goals, growing old together, he shut down. "Let's just focus on the wedding first," he'd say. The wedding was 6 months away when Lucas suggested couples therapy. "Nothing's wrong," he assured me. "Just want to start marriage on the right foot." I agreed. I had no idea that therapy wasn't going to save our relationship. It was going to end it. Moving in together was supposed to feel like the beginning of us. Instead, it felt like I'd invited a guest into my life who never unpacked his bags. At first, I blamed the adjustment period. Everyone says cohabitation takes time, different habits, different rhythms. I told myself Lucas just needed space to settle in, to feel at home in a house that had been mine long before it was ours. But weeks passed, then months, and nothing changed. Lucas never talked about the house as our place. It was always your house, never home. When things broke, I fixed them. When groceries ran low, I restocked them. When conversations drifted toward the future, our future, he redirected with almost professional smoothness. "Let's not get ahead of ourselves," he'd say. We were engaged, 6 months from marriage, and somehow talking about life after the wedding made him uncomfortable. What didn't make him uncomfortable was talking about Claire. Her name started coming up more often, not dramatically, almost casually, like a reference point he didn't even realize he was using. "Claire used to love places like this," he said once when we were downtown. Or, "Claire always said Denver felt temporary." The comments were never cruel, never overt. But they were constant. And there was something in his voice when he talked about her, a softness I didn't hear when he talked about me. I told myself I was imagining it. Then came the social media spiral. Lucas started spending hours scrolling. Not just mindless doom scrolling. Focused, intent. I'd walk past and see familiar faces from his college years. When I asked who he was looking at, he'd lock his phone instantly. Just old friends. One night, I woke up around 2 in the morning and noticed he wasn't in bed. The hallway light was on. I found him sitting against the headboard, phone glowing in the dark. He startled when he saw me. "You scared me," he said, a little too sharply. "Sorry," I replied, trying to sound light. "What's got you awake?" "Couldn't sleep." He flipped the phone face down immediately. I crawled back into bed, but sleep didn't come. My chest felt tight, like my instincts were knocking, and I was pretending not to hear them. The phone became an extension of his body after that. Bathroom, kitchen, short walks to the car. When I mentioned it, he snapped. "I'm allowed to have privacy, Violet." The defensiveness stung more than the secrecy. What bothered me most, though, wasn't the phone. It was the emotional vacancy. Lucas poured energy into the wedding, the optics, the performance. He obsessed over the venue, the photographer, the seating chart. He spent hours on Pinterest boards filled with perfectly staged moments. But anytime I brought up marriage, the actual marriage, he disengaged. "What about kids?" I asked one night while we were doing dishes. "Do you want them?" "Someday," he said vaguely. "How many?" "We'll see." "When? Can we not do this right now?" I stared at him. "We're getting married in 6 months." "And that's stressful enough," he replied. "Let's focus on one thing at a time." I started feeling like a supporting character in my own relationship, like my role was to make his life easier, quieter, more stable. Safe. The word kept echoing in my head. I talked to Evan about it during one of our weekend hikes. "He feels distant," I admitted. "Like he's here, but not really with me." Evan didn't look surprised. "Do you feel wanted?" he asked. The question stopped me cold. "I feel chosen," I said slowly. Evan shook his head. "That's not the same thing." I defended Lucas again. Of course I did. But deep down, something had shifted. I started paying attention. And what I noticed scared me. He loved the image of our life, the stability, the optics, the fact that I was established, reliable, ready. What he didn't love, what he never seemed fully present for, was me. 3 months before the wedding, Lucas suggested couples therapy. "Nothing's wrong," he said quickly. "I just want to make sure we're communicating well before marriage." It sounded reasonable, responsible even. I said yes. The therapist, Dr. Morrison, had a warm office with soft lighting and neutral colors. The first few sessions were fine, surface level, safe. We talked about communication styles, finances, household responsibilities. Whenever the conversation edged toward values or long-term emotional needs, Lucas redirected. "Let's stay focused on the exercise," he'd say. By the fourth session, Dr. Morrison leaned back in her chair and asked a question that changed everything. "Why are you choosing to marry your partner?" She looked at me first. I answered without hesitation. Then she turned to Lucas. And for the first time since I'd met him, he hesitated. Just a beat too long. Something in my chest tightened. And in that pause, I realized I wasn't about to hear what I thought I was going to hear. The pause was small, barely noticeable to anyone who wasn't watching closely. But I was. Lucas shifted on the couch, clasped his hands together, then loosened them again. A nervous habit I'd seen before, usually when he was trying to choose the right words instead of the honest ones. "Well," he started carefully, "Violet is stable. She has her life together. She's reliable. She's someone I can count on." I waited. So did Dr. Morrison. The silence stretched. I felt like I was sitting in the middle of a suspended bridge, waiting to see if it would hold. "She treats me well," Lucas continued. "She's kind. I know she'd be a great wife, a great mother." Dr. Morrison's pen hovered over her notebook. "And?" she asked gently. Lucas swallowed. "I guess, if I'm being completely honest, Violet wasn't my first choice." The words landed like glass shattering. My ears rang. My vision narrowed. For a moment, I honestly thought I'd misheard him. Dr. Morrison didn't react. Her expression stayed calm, professional. "Can you explain what you mean by that?" she asked. Lucas nodded, like he'd been waiting for permission. "There was someone else," he said. "My ex, Claire." The name hit harder than it should have. "We were together for 4 years," he continued. "She moved to New York for her career. Things ended, but we stayed in touch for a while." I stared at the carpet. "She was the one I wanted," he said quietly. "When Violet and I started dating, I was still hoping Claire might come back, or that she'd ask me to move." My hands curled into fists in my lap. "But she didn't," he went on, "and I realized I couldn't wait forever. Violet was here. She wanted the same things. Marriage, stability, a future." I felt like I was watching myself from outside my body. "So," he concluded, glancing at me, "I chose Violet. I settled for her because my first choice wasn't available." Settled? The word echoed in my skull, loud and unforgiving. 3 years. 3 years of love, of trust, of planning. And I was a backup plan, a responsible decision, a consolation prize. Dr. Morrison turned toward me, her voice gentle. "Violet, how do you feel about what Lucas just shared?" The answer came before I could stop it. "Relieved." Lucas's head snapped toward me. "Relieved?" he repeated, disbelief in his voice. "Yes," I said, and to my surprise it was true. Relieved. I stood up. My legs were steady. My mind was clear in a way it hadn't been in months. Relieved that I finally understood why I'd always felt slightly out of reach, why nothing I did ever felt like enough. Relieved that I wasn't crazy. Relieved that I found out now. "I'm done," I said calmly. "We're done." "Violet, wait," Lucas said, reaching for my arm. I stepped back. "Thank you for your honesty," I said. "It saved me years of confusion." I thanked Dr. Morrison, left cash on the table for the session, and walked out. The drive home was a blur. My hands shook when I parked in my driveway, adrenaline finally crashing over me. But my mind stayed calm, crystal clear. The first place I drove was the jewelry store. I returned the ring before Lucas even left the therapist's office. Then I went home and started packing his things. Not angrily, not dramatically, methodically. I called Evan. "I need help," I said, "and your truck." He was there in 20 minutes. I told him everything while we loaded boxes into the bed of his truck. He didn't interrupt once. "I knew something was wrong," he said quietly. "I just didn't want to be right." We dropped Lucas's belongings at his friend's apartment with a short note. "Your things, please don't contact me." My phone had 17 missed calls by the time I blocked his number. The next morning, I found Lucas sitting on my porch. Eyes red, clothes wrinkled, desperation written all over him. "Please," he said, "let me explain." "There's nothing to explain," I replied calmly. "You told the truth." "I didn't mean it like that," he insisted. "It came out wrong." "No," I said, "it came out honest." I closed the door, and with it the life I almost settled for. The house was silent after I closed the door. Not the heavy, aching silence I'd feared, just quiet, clean, like the air after a storm has passed and taken the humidity with it. Lucas stayed on the porch for another 10 minutes. I watched through the front window as he paced, ran a hand through his hair, checked his phone, then knocked again. Softer this time, desperate. I didn't open the door. Eventually, he left. His car pulled away too fast, tires squealing as he turned the corner. I felt nothing watching him go. No satisfaction, no grief, just a deep, steady calm. That was when I knew I'd made the right decision. The fallout came fast. Within hours, I canceled the venue, the caterer, the photographer. Emails flew back and forth, deposits were lost, apologies sent. I handled it all with the same efficiency I used at work when a project went sideways. Emotional distance can be a powerful tool. Lucas, meanwhile, went nuclear on social media. Vague posts about honesty being punished, quotes about vulnerability, carefully curated photos of himself looking wounded, introspective. The narrative was clear. He tried. I ran. For about 3 days, it worked. Then Melissa got involved. She posted one sentence on Facebook and tagged everyone who mattered. If you tell your fiancé in couples therapy that you settled for her because your first choice wasn't available, you don't get to play the victim when she walks away. The comments exploded. People started connecting dots. Friends admitted Lucas had talked about Claire constantly, that he'd shown her Instagram photos at parties, that he'd once joked he'd leave his partner if the timing were right. Screenshots spread. Lucas deleted his accounts within 24 hours. Through Evan and Melissa, I heard the rest. Lucas's parents were furious. They'd contributed to the wedding and lost most of it. His father told him he'd thrown away a woman who would have built a real life with him for a fantasy. The most ironic part? Claire found out. She messaged Lucas to clarify something very publicly. She was engaged, happy, and hadn't spoken to him in years. She asked him to stop talking about her. His first choice wasn't just unavailable. She wanted nothing to do with him. 3 weeks later, I ran into Lucas at Home Depot. He looked smaller somehow, tired, hollow. "Violet," he said softly, "can we talk?" I studied him for a moment and felt absolutely nothing. "No," I said gently. "I don't think that helps either of us." "I made a mistake," he said quickly. "I was confused. I wanted the idea of Claire, not her. You were real." "Yes," I replied. "I was, and you didn't choose me." "I do now." I shook my head. "No, you're choosing not to be alone." That was the moment his hope collapsed. I walked away and didn't look back. That night, Evan and Melissa came over with pizza and cheap beer. We watched terrible reality TV and laughed more than we should have. "You seem lighter," Melissa said. "I am," I replied. "I spent years wondering why I wasn't enough." I took a sip of my drink. Turns out I was just standing in for someone else. Life settled into a new rhythm after that. Work, friends, quiet mornings in my house that finally felt peaceful again. I stopped second-guessing myself, stopped measuring my worth against someone who was never fully present. A month later, Lucas's mother called to apologize. She said I deserved better, that she was sorry. I believed her. As for Lucas, I heard he moved cities, new job, fresh start. I hope he learned something from all this. That love isn't practicality. That honesty without accountability is cruelty. And that people are not interchangeable. Because being someone's backup plan isn't love. And I will never settle for being settled for.